My name is Narong. I'm 80 years old, and I want to answer this question directly and honestly from the very beginning, because it deserves a direct and honest answer. Some people do suddenly start attracting more luck and more money. This is a real phenomenon. It happens, and it is not random. It is not cosmic alignment. It is not a shift in their energetic frequency or a change in what the universe is sending their way. It is the product of something specific that changed in them, something internal, something behavioral, something in the quality of their relationship with their own capacity and their own worth and their own willingness to act that produced a different kind of engagement with the world around them. And that different engagement produced different results, which looked from the outside like suddenly attracting luck and money. The question is not why some people suddenly start attracting these things. The question is what specifically changed in them that produced the sudden change in results. That is the question worth answering. And the answer is both more ordinary and more genuinely useful than any theory about cosmic energy could be. I was born in northern Thailand into circumstances that were genuinely modest. I have watched people across 8 decades change their financial and life circumstances in ways that look dramatic from the outside. And in almost every case, when I looked closely at what had actually changed, it was not something mysterious. It was something specific, something traceable, something that, once you understand it, you can begin to apply in your own life without waiting for cosmic alignment to cooperate. The first thing that changes when people suddenly start attracting better outcomes is their relationship with their own credibility. Not their credibility in the eyes of others, their credibility with themselves. The specific quality of trust between the part of them that sets intentions and the part of them that acts on those intentions. Most people live with a significant gap in that trust. They have told themselves many times that they will do a certain thing and have not done it. They have made commitments to themselves that were not honored. They have set intentions at the beginning of months or years that dissolved within days. And that accumulated history of unkept self-commitments produces a specific quality of inner doubt that accompanies every new intention with the quiet suspicion that this one will not be honored either. When that credibility begins to rebuild, when a person starts making smaller commitments to themselves and actually honoring them day after day without drama and without the need for anyone else to witness or validate the keeping, something changes in the quality of their self-trust. And that changed self-trust shows up in everything, in how they speak about what they are doing, in how they negotiate for what they want, in how they carry themselves in situations where their credibility is being assessed by others, in how they respond to opportunities. People with genuine self-credibility, people who have learned through consistent, small-kept promises to themselves that they actually do what they say they will do, move through the world differently, and the world responds differently to that movement. The second thing that changes is their relationship with value creation and value claiming. This is the single most practically significant internal shift that I have observed producing sudden apparent changes in financial outcomes. People who suddenly start earning more are almost always people who made a specific change in either how much value they were creating or how consistently they were claiming what that value was worth, often both. Most people undercharge for their work. Most people accept the first offer. Most people set prices that reflect their anxiety about their own worth, rather than the actual market value of what they create. And then they attribute the resulting income to circumstance, rather than to that specific pattern of self-undervaluing. When that pattern changes, when a person begins to ask honestly what their work is actually worth, and then claim that amount consistently rather than the amount that feels safe to ask for, the income changes. Not because the universe has aligned, because the market, which was always willing to pay more than what was being asked, is finally being asked. And here's what I didn't understand then. For many years, I believed that what I earned was determined primarily by what the market would offer. I did not see the degree to which what I asked for was determined by what I believed I deserved. And that belief, not the market, was the primary constraint on what I received. When that belief changed, when I began to ask more accurately for what the work was actually worth, the income changed. Not dramatically or overnight, but consistently and in one direction. The third thing that changes is the relationship with clarity. People who suddenly seem to attract better outcomes almost always have developed, at some point before the apparent sudden change, a much clearer and more specific relationship with what they actually want and what they are actually willing to do to move toward it. They have stopped being vague about their goals in the way that keeps goals comfortably aspirational rather than genuinely demanding. They have gotten specific enough about what they want that they can see clearly when opportunities move toward it and when they do not. And that clarity changes what they notice. It changes what they pursue. It changes the specificity of their action in ways that produce more specific results. Most people who feel like they are not making progress toward their financial or life goals are vague about those goals in ways that protect them from the uncomfortable recognition that progress is not happening. The goal is so general that it is impossible to measure whether the day's activities move toward it or not. The person who suddenly appears to attract luck and money has almost always made the transition from comfortable vagueness to uncomfortable specificity. They know what they want. They know what it requires. They know whether today move toward it or not. And that knowledge produces a quality of directed action that vagueness cannot produce. You know what surprised me most? The suddenness of the apparent change was almost always the result of a long, slow period of accumulation that preceded it. The person looked like they suddenly started attracting better outcomes, but when you looked closely, you could see that they had been building the internal conditions for those outcomes for months or years before the results became visible. The self-credibility had been rebuilding through small, kept commitments. The self-worth had been shifting through the slow examination of old stories about what they deserved. The clarity had been developing through the uncomfortable work of getting specific about what they wanted and what it required. The suddenness was real. But the preparation for the suddenness was not sudden at all. It was the quiet, unglamorous, daily work of changing the internal conditions that eventually produced different external results. The fourth thing that changes is the quality of their attention to genuine opportunity. This is connected to clarity, but distinct from it. People who suddenly seem to attract more luck are almost always people who have developed, through some combination of reduced anxiety and increased presence, the ability to see what is actually available in the situations they encounter. Not what they fear might go wrong, not what they need the situation to deliver for their agenda to work, what is actually available. Most people's attention, when they enter any situation, is heavily shaped by their fears and their agendas. They are looking for confirmation that things are going the way they need them to go. They are managing against the outcomes they are afraid of. And in that anxious management, they miss enormous amounts of what is actually available in the room. The person whose observation is more available, whose attention is less consumed by fear and agenda, sees more. And seeing more genuinely translates into more opportunities recognized and pursued. The fifth thing that changes is their relationship with failure and setback. This one is deeply connected to all the others. People who suddenly appear to attract better outcomes have almost always developed a different relationship with what does not work. They have stopped treating failure as evidence of fundamental unworthiness. They have stopped using setbacks as reasons to retreat to the safety of not trying. They have developed the specific quality of resilience that comes not from never being affected by difficulty, but from recovering faster, returning more quickly, and extracting more specifically useful information from what did not work. That resilience is not a personality trait, it is a practice. It is the practice of returning without drama that I have spoken about in other contexts, and it produces a compounding effect over time, because the person who returns fastest after setbacks makes more attempts over any given period, and more attempts in any genuinely uncertain domain produces more eventual success. Not because the universe is rewarding their resilience, because the math of attempts and outcomes is simply more favorable for the person who is attempting more consistently. What most people don't realize is that the luck component of suddenly attracting luck and money is often real but small. There is usually a genuine element of circumstances cooperating, but the circumstances were often always cooperating, and what changed was the person's capacity to recognize and engage with what the circumstances were offering. The opportunity was there before the apparent sudden change, but the person was not available to it, not positioned for it, not capable of recognizing it as opportunity rather than threat or irrelevance. What changed was the person, and that changed person encountered the same world and found more in it. At 80 years old, I can trace the specific changes in my own life that produced what must have looked, from the outside, like suddenly attracting better outcomes. In every case, the change was internal before it was external. The self-credibility rebuilt through kept commitments before the outer credibility improved. The self-worth shifted before the compensation shifted. The clarity deepened before the direction became visible. The resilience developed before the attempts that eventually succeeded. None of that was sudden on the inside. On the inside it was slow, demanding, often discouraging, and frequently requiring the return without drama that I have described. But on the outside, when enough of it had accumulated, it produced results that looked sudden. That looked like luck. That looked like the universe finally deciding to cooperate. The universe did not decide to cooperate. A person changed. And then a changed person encountered the world, and the changed person found more in it than the unchanged person had been able to find. That is the whole story, and it is available to you not when the universe aligns, but when you begin the slow, honest, unglamorous work of building the internal conditions that eventually produce different external results. Tell me in the comments which of these internal changes you sense is most present or most absent in your own current experience. Not the answer that sounds most spiritually evolved, the honest one, because the honest recognition of where you are is always the only real starting point for moving toward where you want to be. And if this message gave you something genuine to work with, stay close to this space, because the sudden change that people experience is the product of sustained, quiet work. And that work is available to you, starting now, one honest, ordinary day at a time.